right, guys. How are you doing? Excellent, excellent. So before we start, I have one big question. So I went over the schedule for the past 2 days, and there's been so far 4 lectures about Redux. So how many of you have been to at least one of them? Okay. Is there anyone who hasn't been to anything? Okay. I hope you came prepared. All right. So we're going to go talk about Redux. Hopefully this won't be very different from what you heard so far. We're not going to be doing it at the beginner level, as it was said. I'm going to do something a lot more complicated. The plan is that as we go, about 10% of you will not understand what's happening. So if by then you don't understand at all, it's good. It's fine. So what we're going to talk about? We're going to talk about cool stuff. We're not going to talk about the structure of Redux. We're not going to talk about actions. Only stuff that are really advanced. Some of them you'll only find in big and complicated applications. But I'll help you understand the meaning behind them and why they can be useful. I won't be talking about libraries. So for those of you who are working with Redux at least a little bit, I think this is the best collection of Redux tools. It's by categories. I think there are about 200 or 300 libraries on that Git repository. Some of them are kind of famous and in use. Some of them have 3 or 4 stars. I don't think anyone can cover all the Redux ecosystem. And unfortunately, about every day, 50 new libraries come out. So it's an endless race. And instead, I'll try to talk to you about the basic of Redux, not the libraries around it. So my name is Boris. I really like React. I really do. I've been doing Angular for a few years, and when React came out, I was like, oh my God, this is simple. This is working. This is easy. I started with React about 1.5 years ago. In the first project that we started, we were looking for a Flux implementation. Redux didn't exist back then, but there are a few other things. There was Flamox and DeLorean and lots of other things the newcomers to React probably won't ever hear about or even know about. Redux came out, I think it was somewhere in May 2015. And most of the people working in the Flux world back then, when they looked at the code, they said, this is crazy. It's like 3 pages of code. How is it possible? And it was possible. It was amazing. Currently, I'm co-authoring with a friend a book about Redux. It's focused only about Redux, no Angular, no React, pure Redux stuff. And I hope you get a taste here of topics we can cover. So Redux by itself is a tiny library. Last time I checked, it was about 3K of code, which is almost nothing, and that's including the comments they have inside. But obviously, that's just a part of your application. Sorry. So you have, inside of Redux, you have a regular structure. I won't go over it. And around it, you have all the bloat that lives there. So you have the UI, which might be React, which might be React Native or Angular 2, different APIs, and stuff like local storage, which should be kind of bundled into APIs, but I didn't. And lots of other little things that you might speak with, like web workers. So I wanted to start and speak a little bit about UI. Usually when people speak about Redux, the first things that come to mind is React. We use it with React. I don't know if any of you been to the lecture a few hours ago about Angular 2, so it works really nice with Angular as well. You could always use it with plain jQuery and Mustache and Knockout and whatever. Kind of makes less sense. But I wanted to talk about how it works, the UI. So there's no magic behind it. Stuff are really, really simple in Redux. In the end, when you use Redux, you get a single store. And that store has only 4 APIs. So you get the get state to see the current state. You get an API to dispatch actions to the store, to subscribe to changes to the store, another thing called replace reducer that's mainly used for development. And for those of you paying attention, there is one more. Anyone knows it? It's really new, about 3 weeks ago. Observables. So they added an observable to Redux. It's a buzzword everywhere. Reactive programming is the big thing. So Redux is now trying to support it fully. I won't be talking about it. I have no idea how well it works. I created a really small app to show you how you can connect to Redux from jQuery. I really don't want to spend a lot of time on it. So kind of, let's run over it really fast. So use a create, in Redux, use a create store to create a simple store. I created really simple reducer that just increments the state when it's sent the inc action. I'm subscribing to the store and then using a jQuery to just inject whatever the state is directly into the body, which is a counter, and a really silly interval to update the counter. So this thing just puts 0 to 100, starts running inside of your body. Nothing exciting. Anyone who's been learning Redux should know this. What people don't know is how React works. So React by itself is really complicated. The library is huge, lots of layers inside of it. Who here is using Redux at least a little bit in their job or maybe in the evenings? Okay. You should start. It's nice. So for our demo, I created a small application. Our application is going to be about cat racing, and it's exactly what you think it is. I'll be doing a lot of coding since I don't like presentations. So this is our app. I'm going to reload it. We got a bunch of cats, and I can do a race between them, and you're free to do your betting. It's happening in real life, and Sorry? The what? Sorry, I can't listen. Oh no. Oh no. It was amazing. Yeah, you missed it. Okay, let's put display mirroring on, and now I'm going to show you the racing. Okay, cool. Better? Yeah. All right. So this is using Redux and a lot of and some React. But what I really wanted to show you is how you connect the two. So some of you probably, if you're using Redux, you use a library called React Connect, React Redux, that has a connect method. If you ever took the time to open the library, it's huge. I think the connect method itself about like 5 or 6 pages of JavaScript. But behind the scenes, the connection to Redux can be that complicated, right? We have only 3 APIs we can use with the store. We got the get state, the dispatch, and the subscribe. So how does React work? Let's go inside. So in our app, one of the components is this. This thing, well, React Mon, is the current leader in the race. I'm going to show it here. It's really simple. By the way, I'm using ES 2015 exclusively. I hope you understand the syntax. Anyone here is not using ES 6? You're either shy or all very advanced, which is great. So this is a simple React component. It gets in the props the leader, which is a structure of a cat, and just show its name. That's it. Super simple. To be able to access Redux, we use a connect function. The connect function gets a parameter, which is a function that maps between the current state and whatever data we want to pull out. So in this case, it's pretty complicated. What I do is I go over all the cats in the race, and I try to find the one that is closest to the finish. And then we take this and pass it to our leader component. So this is plain React Redux. What I wanted to do is look into this function, the connect one. So how does this magic happen? Surprisingly, it's not that complicated. And to do that, I'm going to just recreate it from scratch. No more using React Redux. All right, so let's create a new lib. We'll call it called motion.js. And let's create our own connection from scratch. So first of all, I'll need the store because we need to get data out of it, right? You can't be at the store. The React Redux library does something a bit more complicated using context. I'm going to be using something really simple. I'm just going to take the store from our store. And now I have to create the connect function. So connect. So if we look at the prototype we used in the leader, the connect gets a function, right, which is map state to props. But then it does something weird. And that's the big love of Dan Abramov, the creator of Redux, doing functions that return functions that sometimes return other functions, and in one extreme case that I found, return another function. So we're going to be returning a function from here that accepts a component. Okay, so far so good, just returning a bunch of functions. Now how do we connect to React? So in React, everything is a component. There's nothing else. Even the routing is components. That means we probably need a component of our own. So let's create one. Class, I'll call it connect, doesn't really matter. And it inherits from React component. That's how we build components in React. And then I'll just export connect. We can even do it in one line. Export connect. So what do we write inside of this? So what I'm doing here is creating a class that's going to be wrapping the class that I'm giving. So our connect component is going to be like a master component, and inside of it we'll have the leader or whatever. So in React we have a few lifecycle events that tell us what's going on with the component. One of them is component did mount. This happens once our component is ready to go and connected to the DOM. And here we'll be just using simple store APIs, which is store.subscribe. Subscribe. And when something happens, we'll call, let's send an update function, which I'll create in a moment. Since I'm going to be doing it, since I want to get something real, I also will save a return value of subscribe, which is unsubscribe. Ah, come on. And use it in component will unmount to clean after myself. Okay, so this is just basic setup. Using some, all right, whoops. Okay, so we subscribe to everything. Now every time the store changes, we'll get a notification. What do we do when something changes? Well, let's see. Let's create our update method. What I want to do now is basically take a look at the state and pull the data I need out of it, right? So in case of a leaderboard, I want to get the leading cat. How do we do that? Well, the store has a getState method, API, which gives us the current state. How do we pull only the data that we want? Well, luckily, the user already gave us their map state to props. So let's use that one. State to props. And the only question remaining is where do we save this information? Well, whoever is using React usually saves stuff inside the state. So let's do that. This, set state. And we're basically done. Every time a store changes, I take a look at the store, I pull the data, I run it through the mapping function that gives me only the information my component needs, and then I have to somehow pass it to the component. So first of all, I want to do some initialization, constructor, we'll call the super method, and initialize the state in the beginning, which is exactly the same as before. I'll just map whatever was in the state. And we have only one thing left, and that's to connect the nested component. Yeah? I tried to make it bigger. Is it better? Okay. So the last thing we need to do is basically to render the component, right? And the component is here. That's the component we got as a parameter. So I'll just put it inside component. And I'm going to pass it this state. So let's give this thing a run. Let's see if it's really working. I'm going to import, sorry, not this one. I'm going to import leader.js, connect from lib code motion. Let's take a look if something broke and cross our fingers. Live coding is always terrible. Okay. Surprisingly, it's fine. So all the code we have is about one page of really, really large font. And in the end, that's all I needed to connect React to Redux. So of course, it's not a full solution. I didn't do proper change detection, because I can do a lot of optimizations. If the state didn't really change, no need to redraw stuff. We didn't have props, we didn't handle dispatch, but the code I just wrote is functional. So I can take this and really use it in my project for some really crazy reason. but I really wanted you guys to understand that the connection between React and Redux, or any library, Redux and anything, is usually a really thin and simple layer. There's no black magics inside it. There's no special hooks inside of Redux, just these three functions. That's all you need. So that's the base. I'm going to jump back to the mirroring, sorry. All right. So we spoke about React. How does it work with things like Angular 2? Well, Angular 2 is really a bunch of components, very similar to the way React works. There are a few libraries out there doing it now. I think the most common one is ng2 Redux. Personally, I think it's kind of flaky. The API is not so good. There are a few other competitors. They're slowly rising. I have no idea which one is going to win. But the basics are exactly the same. So if you open up the code there, it's just the store and the same three methods. All right, so we spoke about that. Another interesting thing about Redux is the APIs. So who here heard about this thing, Redux Func? Okay, cool. The others who didn't hear about it before? I wonder what the rest are doing. Okay. Like the third of the people know it, the third doesn't know it, and the third is not sure. So whoever is going to do a tutorial in Redux, you'll probably see this sometimes toward the end. All the to-do list tutorials use this. And this is the common way to speak to the server. What does it mean? I'm going to open up my code. Yes, I know I have to switch. I have to switch this time. And I'm going to look at the code that goes to the server. So I'm going to be frank with you. This game is not currently connected to the server. We run everything locally, but I do have some infrastructure in place to start doing that. So let's take a short look at that. In the other lectures that you heard, people spoke a lot about actions. Action is an object that you send to the store to do any change. Actions by themselves are kind of boring and, well, this is a more advanced topic, but let's say this is a really simple action. Might be, I don't know, ping, whatever. It's just an object holding ping and maybe some extra data. The problem with this thing is that if I want to speak to a server, I can't, right? Because a call to a server might return a bit later. I already lost the context. I'm not there anymore. And I don't have any way to talk to the store. So one hack I can do is just import the store here and use it directly, which kind of works, but breaks a lot of structural application. So what the creator of Redux came up with is something called Redux Func. And it said, you know what, instead of returning an object, we're going to return a function, and that function is going to get a connection to dispatch and to getting the store, and then I can do whatever I want inside the function, and later, when it's done, call the server. So it's going to be look something like this. So my getUpdate function returns another function, a regular part in Redux, and inside it I'm using the fetch API to go somewhere and fetch something, and once I'm successful, I'm going to dispatch a new method out. That's the normal way to do stuff in Redux server communication. So you probably see what to do here, and you start thinking, wait, doing access to the server is a bit more complicated, right? I have to set some headers usually. I have to do proper error handling. Like if you do a production app, when you only do a console log when something happens, someone's going to get fired. Another problem with this, so this is happening inside the race because I want to get an update about the race. But let's say I have other parts of my application, like, I don't know, some information about the cats in the race. And here I have very similar code, right? I'm going to another API and trying to fetch the current cats. And again, I have the same boilerplate. I have to set up authentication. I have to do handle different errors. So of course, a good developer would say, okay, no problem. I'm going to create a new library that handles it all. But that library needs access to getState, to fetch the current access token. It needs access to dispatch, so it can send more events. And slowly, our usage of that library starts to become complicated and broken all around. So one thing that Redux does that usually you won't hear in introductions is something called middlewares. So the idea of a middleware is to sit between whatever the reducer is getting and whoever is sending the actions. So any action in our system is going to go through the middleware before it reaches the reducers. And it gives a lot of power. So in my example, I hope you can see it on the left, I have a little middleware that all it does is just print a message every time an action happens. Let me open this middleware. So a signature is pretty crazy. A middleware is a function that receives not really a store, but a new object similar to a store. It returns a function that received a next function, and that returns a function that received the action we're trying to perform. It might sound really weird, but in the end, we can just write our code in the innermost function, and it's all fine. We don't have to worry about the other stuff. All we have to do is call next. Next tells Redux, OK, I've done whatever I want to do. Continue down the chain, call the other API middlewares, and then call the reducers and do the whole stuff. And then I'm just using a console log to show the type of action I have. This is the base of middlewares, nothing else. Now, the nice thing here is that I have access to everything. I have access, this is not really a store, I can change it to dispatch and get state. So I have access to the state, I have access to dispatch, I have access to the currently running action, and since I have access to the next function, I can do something really crazy. Before sending it on, I can take the action and modify it from some reason. I can even suppress it. So if I disable this line, we will not see any changes in the app anymore. So now nothing is happening. So I can use it for, say, authorization purposes. I can check any action going through and say, wait, the user can't do that now because he's not logged in. Or I have to redirect him to log in because he's trying to do something unauthorized. Another simple example would be, I prepared another thing, let's say, we have an empty one. Let's change it to something more interesting, console time on the action type. Now, I can try to do performance benchmarking. So this thing will now tell me how long each action is taking. And I can try to find if I have some problem with my reducers. So a lot of uses for actions. I think I have a few nicely written down here somewhere. But there's one thing that usually beginners don't do, and that's use the middleware for communicating with the server. So we have everything here. Why can't we do it? So let's create a really simple communication middleware. So in a middleware, I want to try and start catching any action that's type API. So if action type equals API, let's do something. That something might be, in our case, I'm going to open up my old actions like the get update. I'm going to take this whole code. So all the code that goes to the server, I'm just going to put it here inside of action. So I have a few problems with this approach. First of all, which URL am I going to, right? Each action has to go to a different place. Well, actions have parameters, so I can just put it inside the parameter in the action. We'll add it in a moment. And our problem is, all right, so I went there, I got the information about the current race conditions. How do I tell the system what's going on? So I have to dispatch another action to update everything. But what kind of action? So here I used set race before because that was the update race one. But it might be anything, set user, set cat, set comments. Well, we can pass it with the action as well. Let's call it action next. So now API is very generic, and you have to figure out how to call it. So I'm going to jump back here and take a look at the previous function. So now I had all this stuff here. It was a function, returning a function. It's really hard to test. There's asynchronous things going on here. But now with the API middleware, I can do stuff like this. Export, const get update. I'm going to change it to just a plain object. So we need an API, that's the type. We need the URL, right, which we have here, which is race. And we have to figure out what's the next one, and we already have it here. it's next set trace. And just import it, so it's not red. So this whole thing that you used to write again and again in different action creators can turn back into a simple object. You can even delete it because it's really ugly. This is super easy to test, as the only thing it does, I call a function and it gives me a static object. There's nothing to test here, so your test will be just writing it again. And any other place I'm going to use it, like here, I can do exactly the same thing. I just delete the whole stuff and say, we don't need this anymore. We just do type API, URL, cats, and next is whatever, set cats. Done. Much simpler, much cleaner. And I think the biggest thing you will gain here is when a new developer comes on the team and has a bunch of ugly code to write and ask you, well, where should I put it? Should I put it in my components? Should I put it in my action creators, in my reducers? You can tell them, all our logic is only in one place, in the middlewares. And the reason is really simple. So if you look at I made a small table here, what each place can do. So a reducer is really limited. It can only see your state, or maybe a part of it. Your actions are usually really limited, as only you can see nothing there unless you use Redux-func or similar stuff. But with middleware, I can both do everything, and I can change actions. I can cancel actions. So if I have a place with a lot of power, might as well just push everything there and save on problems. Any questions, by the way? I know I'm running really fast. I'm trying to put a lot of ideas in. So later when you start learning Redux, you'll be like, wait, but I heard there's another way. Yeah.
How does it work?
Mm-hmm. Right, so the question was, how do I chain promises? So let's say if I wanted to create a chain of promises, what would I have been doing, let's say, the regular way? I would write a chain of promises inside my action creator, right? So why not write the same chain inside the middleware? I wouldn't create an API, so I would have an API middleware, still on this side, but then if I need a chain of promises for, let's say, the login flow, because it's complicated and uses OAuth2, I will create an OAuth2 middleware that catches the start login action and then uses the API middleware to send actions like, okay, connect to server A, get the token. When it's done, connect to server B, get the token. When that's done, do whatever you need. You're just moving a bunch of code to a different place. That's the whole idea. There's nothing revolutionary here. It's all about structuring your code and putting everything in one place. Just a bunch of middlewares. Anything else? Yeah. What do you mean, the spinners? So the question was how to create a spinner. I hope we have time. I'm going to show you. It's really cool. Once you do it with the middlewares, it's really cool. And if I don't have time, come to me right after, and I'll show you. All right. So I talked a little bit about the middlewares. We talked about how to connect to API. We talked about the UI. I'm going to jump a little bit deeper inside Redux and show you some other cool things. And I want to talk about how we connect, let's say, to local storage. So let's say I have a requirement. In the middle of a race, I want to take a snapshot, save it into local storage, and later come back and cheat my friends somehow. I'm not sure how. I have to think about it. And for that, I want to create a new action. My action is going to be save state, something like that. So I'm going to create a new middleware, of course. I'm going to call it the local rep. Don't look. As always, if I'm trying to do logic, I always try to use middlewares. So I have a new middleware. It's called local storage middleware. It's listening to state events. What do I do now? Well, it's pretty simple. I'm going to go to local storage, set item, Redux, and then I have to figure out what I'm going to say there. So I have access to the state inside of middlewares, so it should not be a problem. All I need to do is JSON stringify, get state. And that's it. That's all the code I need to now to take the whole of my application state and sync it with a local storage. So this thing is working. That's nice and fun. And now a question comes, well, how do I pull it out? I told you that middlewares are all powerful and they can do whatever they want. But in the end, so there is one more dispatch. There's one function here that's missing, right? So I got get state, but I don't really have set state. So if I pull something from local storage, how exactly do I change the application state? So this is where middlewares kind of fall short, and that's by design. No one should be changing our store. There's only one actor in Redux that can change the store, and that's, anyone knows? The reducer. No, the reducers. Right. So I'm going to jump to a reducer. This is our reducer. Currently, it's using some another utility from Redux. It's called combine reducers to make things a bit prettier. And I want to extend it now so it supports the new, I don't know, load state method. How did I call it? Restore state. The thing is, I don't want to touch this root reducer. I feel like what I'm doing is just adding some kind of side functionality. It's something special. I'm not trying to control a part of a state. I'm going to replace the whole thing. So I want to find a way that I'm going to add this without touching the existing code. So here's like all the back magic of Redux come in, and that's stuff like decorators and enhancers. I'm going to create a decorator for this reducer that handles the new functionality. So what I'm going to do is create something, let's say, like a local storage decorator, which is a function that receives a reducer and returns a signature of a standard normal reducer, which is state and action. And inside, I'm going to do some weird magic. What I'm going to do is first I'm going to check if the action is not restore state. Well, if it's not restore state, then I'm just going to call the original reducer I got, and we're done. But if it is, then I'm going to do right? Let's make it a bit prettier. So I created something weird here. There's a function receiving a reducer and returning another function. Again, the old Redux love. But now I can, instead of exporting my root reducer, I'm going to wrap it with my new nifty decorator. So what happens now? Every action that the root reducer receives is going to first go through this check. If it's not a restore state, fine, just pass it on. Whatever is returned, we return it back to Redux, to the store. But if it's restore state, I'm just going to take whatever it's inside the local storage and put it inside. So in order to test it, let me go to the, like this thing is a little panel thing I created, and I'm going to add a few more buttons. Button, on click, we're going to call it save state. Save. And we're going to do the same for restore state. And let's hope that nothing broke. If something broke. Click buttons, yes. A new HTTP5 feature I'm adding now, buttons. All right, so let's try. Start race, pause it, save the state, let it run again, stop, and then try to restore. Cool, it's all working. And the nice thing here, I didn't change any of the existing code in my application, right? All I did was add a completely new middleware, didn't touch existing code, and then I went to the reducers and I just decorated the reducer. I didn't change it in any way. So it's kind of pretty much safe to do this stuff. And it allows me to add more and more functionality without modifying any existing code. So this is kind of a tip of the iceberg for the decoration stuff. You can do reducer decorations, do a lot of really cool stuff, like whitelisting actions. Let's say my application have a lot of really, say my application has a lot of actions going on. Maybe even every time someone scrolls, I want to send an action, and that's going to kill some of my reducers. So I can easily decorate some reducers to ignore that action, to speed up stuff. It's super easy to get stuff like undo and redo. So history is really easy with Redux. Speed test, tree reallocation, a lot of stuff. So here's a super simple example of using a library from Redux called Redux undo. I want to make my comments in whatever application undoable, so I can do undo and redo on comments. I don't even have to touch the comments reducer. I just decorate it with undoable. That's it. The same for ignoring actions, like I say, performance improvements. Let's say my recipe's reducer can be really small, really slow. So I can just decorate it and say, you know what, every time you scroll, just don't send it to that reducer. It's too slow. There's a lot of stuff you can do with decoration. You can decorate middleware's actions. You can decorate reducers. You can do a whole lot of stuff. And since we have 5 minutes, I'm going to do one last really weird thing to answer your question. A constants creator. So whoever is working with Redux here in the crowd should be saying bad words, because it makes no sense. But I'm going to show you something really weird. So in Redux, all the actions have a name, right? A string name. To be more organized, usually we create a single file called constants, where I put all the names as constants. This way you don't have collisions in the future. So a developer 1 year from now doesn't come in and try to write exactly this, reuse the same name. Usually it's just simple names. I'm going to do something a bit weirder. I'm going to create a function that's called create async const. It's going to receive a name and return an object that has pending, right? And that's the same for success, error, success, error. So why did I do that? I'm going to take, you remember I used the setCats action to change the store after an API completed. I'm going to rewrite it now using this new nifty create async const. I made a spelling mistake there, but it doesn't matter. So now that I've done that, theoretically I should go to the action creators, but there's nothing to do there. Not going to even touch it. The only place I'm going to go is the API. In the API, if you remember, when I'm successful, I dispatch the next action. Now I have to change it and dispatch the key success. But that means for my error, I can dispatch error. And for my pending, I'm going to do the following. I'm going to dispatch pending even before I start my API request. Right, so now my API middleware is pretty robust. It sends a notification before it starts speaking to the server, and it sends notification both on error and success. And all I have to go is go to my reducer. Let's say this is a race reducer, right? So it's a middleware, race reducer. And instead of set race, do this. So set race, success, do something. Error, do something else. Pending, I don't know, change the state so it shows. So it tells the UI to show a spinner. So I hope it kind of answers your question. Right. That was like a super fast, advanced run over Redux. I know some of you didn't understand the stuff going on here. I really hope that you take a time. It takes about 30 minutes to listen to the presentation by Dan Abramov, the creator of Redux on Egghead. He has a bunch of short videos. Once you listen to them, I think, in my opinion, you're ready to start playing with Redux. It's super simple. And hopefully when you do that, all the stuff we talk about now will suddenly be clicking and you'll be like, okay, I figure out what's going on here. I understand. I forgot about this. It took me a long time to find it. All right, guys, so if you want to know a lot about Redux, the book is out, the first one. We worked a lot of time on it. It's not complete yet, but we're working on it. And just want to say Redux is a really cool platform. We do a lot of work with Redux, and a lot of our work with Angular 2 is now using Redux as well. And I think the biggest thing that we noticed working there is that after a while people say, well, why the hell are we using Angular 2? Let's just use Redux and React. It just works. And it takes no time to train someone. In 1 week, you could be, knees deep, or neck deep, whatever is better for you in developing React and Redux applications. Any questions? We have like 50 seconds. Yeah? Of course. Yeah.
If you have this action, some creators which you have always the same kind of actions like adding through and
I'm not sure how to repeat your question, Ivan. So if you created a trick with async constants, do you need to change something in the reducers? You don't need to. Most of your reducers will be taking regular actions. This is server communication, only async stuff. So it's kind of different, but it works well with Redux actions and other libraries. I used the Redux actions in the reducer and just plugged in. You didn't have to change anything. And I don't think another library will add anything, just, as little libraries as possible, in my opinion. Anything else?
you're not right about what you said. Request
I didn't see. So I can't really comment about Angular bindings. I looked at a few of them just to see the API, and it looked kind of weird. Some they decorate, some they extend classes. It feels a lot uglier than React. So I have a feeling they'll find a really nice way to do it. Maybe one of the current libraries will just mutate, but
The RX is the
so I don't know. All right, guys, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you around.